A search operation is continuing for at least 6 people thrown into a river in the US city of Baltimore after this huge container ship collided with a bridge, sending it crashing into the water.
For centuries, mankind has sought to tame the vast and unforgiving seas, pouring countless hours into crafting resilient vessels meant to conquer the ocean's challenges. Yet even the most breathtaking feats of maritime engineering are no match for the untamed fury of Mother Nature.
The best way to describe it is it's very similar to the movie Titanic. People were jumping onto the top of the lifeboats and pushing down women and children to try to get to them.
Join us as we delve into the most amazing and incredible ship's accidents. MV Rena, New Zealand's worst maritime disaster. The MV Rena, a 774-foot Liberian flag container vessel, made headlines in 2011 when it ran aground on the Astrolabe Reef off the coast of New Zealand, causing the country's worst marine environmental disaster.
New Zealand's worst maritime environmental disaster is actually getting worse this morning. A large crack is seen on a cargo ship stuck on a reef.
The ship, built in 1990 and operated by the Greek shipping company Costamare, was carrying 1,368 containers, 700 tons of heavy fuel oil, and 200 tons of marine diesel oil when it struck the reef at full speed on October 5th, due to a navigational error by the crew. As the waves and tide battered the stricken vessel, cracks in the hull widened, eventually splitting the ship into 3 pieces.
The ship had run aground onto the reef, and the reef was just piles of broken rock and then just giant piles of broken ship.
Over 200 tons of oil leaked into the pristine waters of the Bay of Plenty, creating a toxic slick that stretched for miles. The oil spill killed more than 2,000 seabirds, including endangered species like the New Zealand dotterel and the little blue penguin.
It's a bit of a disaster, isn't it? A bit sad for everyone along the beach for their holiday.
We just came along for a walk on the beach. Oh, we can't walk on our beach. What's happening?
And contaminated local beaches, forcing their closure and damaging the region's tourism industry. The captain and navigation officer of the MV Rena were arrested and faced charges of operating a vessel in a manner causing unnecessary danger or risk and discharging harmful substances from ships. The wreck of the MV Rena remained on the Astrolabe Reef for over 4 years, as salvage teams worked to remove the containers and debris from the site. In 2015, the last visible remains of the ship were finally removed, but the environmental impact of the disaster continued to be felt for years afterward. Delta Mariner, bridge over troubled water. When a cargo ship collides with a bridge, it's already a recipe for disaster. But when that vessel is transporting components for space rockets, the stakes climb to astronomical heights. Such was the case on a fateful day in 2012, when an incident occurred that would make headlines and leave onlookers marveling at both the destructive power and the near miss of catastrophe. The Delta Mariner, a 312-foot cargo ship designed to transport space rocket components, found itself in a precarious situation on January 26, 2012, when it collided with the Egner's Ferry Bridge in Kentucky.
It's huge. We've been on a cruise, and that's just about the size of it.
To hear the words that the key bridge has collapsed, it's shocking.
The bridge, which spans the Tennessee River and connects the communities of Aurora and Cadiz, stood 64 feet above the water, a height that should have allowed the Delta Mariner to pass safely beneath. However, as the cargo ship approached the bridge, its captain failed to properly gauge the vessel's clearance. The resulting collision tore a 322-foot hole in the bridge's span, sending twisted steel and concrete debris raining down onto the Delta Mariner's deck. Miraculously, no vehicles were on the bridge at the moment of impact, and the Delta Mariner's crew escaped unharmed. The vessel itself sustained only minor damage and was able to continue its journey after a brief delay. The collapse of the Egner's Ferry Bridge caused significant disruption to local traffic, forcing motorists to take a 124-mile detour until repairs could be completed. Costa Concordia, a captain's folly.
When I heard this creaking sound and, the ship was, turning over more, we didn't know what to do.
On January 13, 2012, the Costa Concordia, a colossal 951-foot cruise ship carrying over 4,200 passengers and crew, sailed dangerously close to the island of Giglio off the coast of Tuscany, Italy. The ship's captain, Francesco Schettino, had deviated from the planned route in an attempt to perform a salute to the island, a maneuver that brought the vessel perilously near the rocky shoreline. At 9:45 p.m., the Costa Concordia struck a submerged rock, tearing a 174-foot gash in the ship's hull. Water began pouring into the engine room, causing a power failure and leaving the massive ship adrift in the darkness. As the Costa Concordia began to list heavily to starboard, panic spread among the passengers and crew. Captain Schettino, rather than overseeing the evacuation, abandoned the ship, leaving his charges to fend for themselves. The ensuing chaos claimed the lives of 32 people, while dozens more were injured.
32 people died in those first horrible hours afterward.
Schettino, dubbed Captain Coward by the Italian press, was later convicted of manslaughter, causing a shipwreck and abandoning his passengers. He is currently serving a 16-year prison sentence.
And because of that, last month, the ship's captain, Francesco Schettino, was sentenced to 16 years in prison for a variety of charges, including negligence and multiple manslaughter.
The wreck of the Costa Concordia was eventually refloated and towed to Genoa.
Now, the raising of the cruise liner, the Costa Concordia, has been an unprecedented success. The remarkable engineering feat saw the huge 114,000-ton ship lifted and rolled into an upright position,
where it was dismantled for scrap, a somber end to a once magnificent vessel whose fate was sealed by the reckless actions of its captain. San Giorgio, the twice-sunk cruiser. The Italian cruiser San Giorgio, a 428-foot warship built in 1908, had a tumultuous history. During World War II, the San Giorgio was sent to the port city of Tobruk, Libya, to support Italian forces against the advancing British Army. As the tide of the battle turned against the Italians, the San Giorgio's captain, unwilling to let his ship fall into enemy hands, ordered her to be scuttled in the harbor. The once proud cruiser settled to the bottom of the bay, her guns silenced. After the war, the victorious British decided to salvage the San Giorgio, intending to use her as a floating workshop. In 1952, after years of painstaking work, the cruiser was refloated and prepared for her journey back to Italy. Fate, however, had other plans. While under tow, the San Giorgio encountered a fierce storm. The heavy winds and rough seas proved too much for the aging vessel, and she broke free from her tow lines. Helpless, the cruiser drifted until she collided with rocks and began to sink once more. The San Giorgio's second and final plunge to the seafloor marked the end of a long and storied career, one that had seen her serve in 2 world wars and endure the ignominy of being sunk not once, but twice. MV Kismetum 1, a smuggler's fate. The MV Kismetum 1, a 259-foot Turkish ocean freighter, found itself at the center of an international drug smuggling scandal in December 1992. The vessel, which had previously been caught smuggling heroin in 1991, was allegedly carrying a staggering 6,600 pounds of morphine base when it set sail from the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean Sea. Unbeknownst to the crew, Turkish and American authorities were closely monitoring the Kismetum 1. As the freighter attempted to make its way to Turkey, it was intercepted by 3 Turkish naval warships, a submarine, and the USS Briscoe, an American destroyer. Rather than surrender, the Kismetum 1's crew attempted to flee, leading to a dramatic 4-day chase across the Mediterranean. The pursuit came to an abrupt end when the freighter sank in rough seas, its illicit cargo disappearing beneath the waves. The Turkish Navy managed to rescue the crew, but the loss of the morphine, worth millions of dollars on the black market, dealt a significant blow to the drug smuggling operation. Empt Haven, a floating inferno. On April 11, 1991, the Emmet Haven, a 935-foot oil tanker laden with 944,000 barrels of crude oil, was unloading its cargo onto a floating platform off the coast of Genoa, Italy, when disaster struck. A massive explosion ripped through the ship, setting the surrounding waters ablaze and sending a column of black smoke billowing into the sky. The force of the blast was so powerful that it tore Empt Haven in half, spilling thousands of barrels of oil into the Mediterranean Sea. As the fire raged, the tanker's crew, many of whom were injured, fought desperately to escape the burning wreckage. For 3 days, the inferno consumed the stricken vessel, creating an environmental catastrophe that would take more than a decade to clean up. An estimated 50,000 tons of crude oil poured into the sea, fouling the coastlines of Italy and France and devastating local marine life. Investigations into the cause of the explosion were hampered by the extensive damage to Midhaven, but some experts believe that a faulty pump cover may have been to blame. USS San Francisco, collision in the depths. On January 8, 2005, the USS San Francisco, a 362-foot Los Angeles-class nuclear submarine, was traveling at full speed, submerged 525 feet below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, when it collided with an uncharted seamount. The impact, which occurred 364 nautical miles southeast of Guam, was so violent that it sent crew members flying through the air and left 98 of the 137 onboard injured. The collision tore a 52-foot hole in the submarine's forward ballast tanks, damaging the sonar dome and the main ballast tanks. Miraculously, the submarine's pressure hull remained intact, and the nuclear reactor was undamaged. Despite the extensive damage, the skilled crew managed to keep the vessel afloat and limp back to Guam. Investigations revealed that the seamount, which rose 6,500 feet from the seafloor, was not marked on the submarine's charts. The USS San Francisco's captain, Commander Kevin Mooney, was later relieved of his command and issued a letter of reprimand for failing to properly navigate the vessel. SS Airfield, a floating forest in Australia. In the tranquil waters of Homebush Bay, just west of Sydney, Australia, a peculiar sight greets visitors. The SS Airfield, a 593-foot British cargo ship, floating serenely with a lush forest growing on its deck. Built in 1911 by the Alsa Shipbuilding Company in Scotland, the steam-powered vessel served in World War I, transporting troops and supplies across the Atlantic Ocean. After the war, the ship was converted into a coal carrier and spent decades plying the routes between Australia and New Zealand. In the early 1970s, the SS Airfield was retired from service and sent to Homebush Bay, where it was to be dismantled for scrap. However, a visionary named Eric Wainman saw potential in the old ship and decided to give it a new lease on life. Wainman, a former Navy sailor and shipbreaker, purchased the vessel and began the process of transforming it into a floating forest. Using a combination of soil, mulch, and compost, Wainman and his team created a fertile growing medium on the ship's deck. They then planted a variety of trees, shrubs, and flowers, carefully selecting species that could thrive in the unique conditions of a floating garden. Over time, the plants took root and flourished, creating a stunning green oasis in the middle of the bay. Today, the SS Airfield is a popular tourist attraction, drawing visitors from around the world who come to marvel at the incredible sight of a ship-turned forest. SS Maheno, the cyclone that sealed her fate. The Grangemouth Dockyard Company in Scotland built the SS Maheno, a 410-foot ocean liner, in 1905 for the Union Company of New Zealand. She was designed to ferry passengers and cargo between New Zealand and Australia, a route she would ply for nearly 3 decades. The Maheno was a sleek and modern vessel for her time, with accommodations for up to 162 passengers and a crew of 65. During World War I, the Maheno was called into service as a floating ambulance and hospital ship, playing a crucial role in treating wounded soldiers from the battlefields of Europe and the Middle East. Her speed and reliability made her a valuable asset to the war effort, and she completed numerous voyages between the front lines and the safety of Australia and New Zealand. After the war, the Maheno returned to her civilian duties, carrying passengers and cargo across the Tasman Sea. She became a beloved fixture on the Trans-Tasman route, known for her comfort and reliability. However, as the years passed, Maheno began to show her age. By the mid-1930s, she was no longer the state-of-the-art vessel she had once been. In 1935, the Union Company made the difficult decision to sell the Maheno to a shipbreaker's yard in Japan. As the Maheno set out on her final voyage, bound for the shipbreaker's yard in Osaka, fate intervened in the form of a powerful cyclone. The storm swept through the Coral Sea, packing winds of up to 120 miles per hour and generating waves over 30 feet high. The Maheno, already weakened by age and neglect, was no match for the fury of the cyclone. The force of the storm snapped the ship's tow line, leaving her at the mercy of the raging winds and waves. The helpless vessel was dragged towards Fraser Island, off the coast of Queensland, Australia. Despite the best efforts of her skeleton crew, the Maheno ran aground on the sandy shores of the island, her hull breached and taking on water. Efforts to refloat the Maheno proved futile, and she remains on Fraser Island to this day, a rusting hulk slowly being reclaimed by the sand and the sea. Her once grand superstructure has long since collapsed, and her decks are now home to a variety of plant and animal life. FV Pacey Setter, the mystery of the missing crab boat. The FV Pacey Setter, a 58-foot crab fishing boat, left Dutch Harbor, Alaska on January 27, 1996, with a crew of 4 experienced fishermen. The vessel was last seen loaded with over 150 crab pots as she set out into the treacherous waters of the Bering Sea. When the Pacey Setter failed to return to port as scheduled, a search was launched. A distress beacon and 2 empty life rafts were found, but there was no sign of the crew or the vessel itself. The Coast Guard concluded that the boat had likely succumbed to the notoriously rough seas.
They've weathered this rough patch many times before.
Perhaps due to the heavy load of crab pots on deck. Theories abound as to what might have happened to the Pacey Setter and her crew. Some speculate that the ship may have been struck by a rogue wave or capsized due to icing on the superstructure. Others wonder if the crew fell victim to foul play or a tragic accident. Despite extensive searches, no trace of the Pacey Setter or her crew has ever been found. The fate of the vessel remains a mystery. Octavius, the ghost ship of the Arctic. In 1775, the whaling ship Herald made a chilling discovery while sailing off the coast of Greenland. Adrift in the icy waters was the Octavius, a trading vessel that had been missing since 1761 when it attempted to navigate the treacherous Northwest Passage. As the crew of the Herald boarded the eerily silent ship, they were horrified to find the entire crew of the Octavius frozen to death. The captain sat at his desk, his pen still poised over the logbook, while the crew lay in their bunks, their faces contorted in terror. The last entry in the logbook was dated 1762, suggesting that the Octavius had been drifting, crewless, for 13 years. The Herald's crew, too frightened to remain on board, retrieved the logbook and hastily returned to their own ship. When another vessel attempted to locate the Octavius to salvage her, the ghost ship had vanished, never to be seen again. The fate of the Octavius and her doomed crew has become a legendary tale of the perils of Arctic exploration and the mysteries that lie hidden in those frigid, unforgiving waters. Boss 400, the broken barge of Sandy Bay. Off the coast of Sandy Bay in Cape Town, South Africa, lies the rusting hulk of the Boss 400, a 354-foot French crane barge that met its end during a violent storm in 1994. The massive vessel was being towed when it broke free from its tow line and collided with the rocks in the bay. Rescue attempts were hindered by the barge's remote location and the severe damage it had sustained. Upon inspection, it was determined that the Boss 400 was beyond repair, and salvage efforts were abandoned. In the years since the accident, the wreck of the Boss 400 has become an unexpected tourist attraction. Some daring individuals even climb aboard the wreckage to explore the decaying decks and twisted metal. Despite the dangers posed by the unstable structure and sharp edges, the Boss 400 continues to deteriorate under the constant assault of wind and waves. MS Estonia, tragedy on the Baltic Sea. The MS Estonia, a 515-foot car ferry, set sail from Tallinn, Estonia, on September the 27th, 1994, bound for Stockholm, Sweden. Carrying 989 passengers and crew, the ship encountered rough seas and high winds in the early hours of September 28th. Suddenly, a loud bang was heard, and the ship began to take on water rapidly.
Stormy September night, and the MS Estonia is in perilous conditions.
The official investigation concluded that the bow visor, a large door at the front of the ship used for loading vehicles, had failed due to the heavy waves, allowing water to flood the car deck. The weight of the water destabilized the vessel, causing it to capsize and sink in just 30 minutes. However, some survivors and experts have questioned the official explanation. 2 crew members reported hearing explosions before the sinking, And there were allegations that Estonia was carrying secret military cargo, including explosives. These rumors have fueled conspiracy theories about the true cause of the disaster. Tragically, only 137 people were rescued from the icy waters of the Baltic Sea. The sinking of the MS Estonia remains the deadliest maritime disaster in European waters since World War II, and its legacy continues to haunt the families of the 852 victims who lost their lives that fateful night. The wreck of the Mars, a powder keg at sea. In 1564, during the Northern Seven Years' War, the Swedish warship Mars met a violent end during the Battle of Öland. The Mars, a 173-foot-long galleon armed with 107 guns, was the flagship of the Swedish Navy and a formidable opponent on the high seas. As the Mars engaged the Allied Danish and Lübeckian fleets, a small fire on board ignited the ship's gunpowder stores, triggering a massive explosion. The blast tore the Mars apart, sending the burning wreckage and her 800-man crew to the bottom of the Baltic Sea. The sudden destruction of Mars reflected the dangers of carrying large quantities of gunpowder on wooden ships. In the heat of battle, even a small spark could turn a vessel into a floating powder keg, ready to explode at any moment. The wreck of Mars lay undisturbed for over 400 years until it was rediscovered in 2011. Archaeologists have since been studying the remains of the once mighty warship, piecing together the story of her final moments and the lives of the men who served aboard her. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. A team of explorers navigating the frigid waters of the Arctic Ocean stumbled upon a perplexing anomaly. Amidst the serene beauty, they encountered a shipwreck defying the laws of nature. It floated effortlessly, enveloped in an ethereal greenish-blue luminescence. This otherworldly glow cast an eerie aura, prompting the team to delve deeper into the mystery. Following meticulous research and analysis, a compelling theory emerged to explain the phenomenon. The team posited that the shipwreck's hull, over time, had become saturated with bioluminescent dinoflagellates. These microscopic organisms, known for their ability to emit light, had colonized the wreck, creating a mesmerizing spectacle. Furthermore, the unique chemical composition of the Arctic waters may have amplified this bioluminescence, resulting in the vibrant glow observed by the explorers.
Since water more quickly absorbs the other colors in the spectrum. Now, bioluminescent dinoflagellates can be beautiful.
What are your thoughts on this extraordinary occurrence? Let us know in the comments. Cherry Venture, beached and buried. In 1973, the Cherry Venture, a 485-foot Scandinavian cargo ship, found herself at the mercy of a fierce storm off the coast of Queensland, Australia. The vessel, built in 1945, was carrying a light load of cargo when she encountered the tempest, which quickly overwhelmed her. The Cherry Venture's captain attempted to steer the ship to safety, but the force of the waves and the ship's lack of stability due to her insufficient cargo proved too much. The vessel ran aground on Tiwa Beach, her hull breached and took on water. Fortunately, the entire crew managed to escape the stricken ship safely. However, salvage efforts proved futile, and the Cherry Venture remained stranded on the sandy shore. For years, the wreck of the Cherry Venture was a popular tourist attraction, with visitors flocking to see the massive ship resting on the beach. However, as time passed, the elements took their toll on the vessel. In 2007, the decision was made to bury the remains of the Cherry Venture in the sand, putting an end to her long vigil on Tiwa Beach. MS Riverdance, a ferry's final voyage. On January 31, 2008, the MS Riverdance, a 394-foot ferry, was traveling from Warren Point, Northern Ireland, to Heysham, England, when it encountered rough seas in the Irish Sea. As the vessel battled the waves, a large swell struck the ship, causing it to roll heavily and dislodging its cargo. The shifting cargo destabilized the Riverdance, leaving her at the mercy of the storm. The crew managed to steer the stricken ferry towards the coast, eventually running her aground near Blackpool, England. Rescue helicopters were dispatched to evacuate the ship's crew and passengers, while tugboats attempted to refloat the vessel. However, the Riverdance's position on the shore and the damage she had sustained made salvage efforts impractical. In the following weeks, the wreck of the Riverdance became a popular tourist attraction, drawing thousands of curious onlookers to the Blackpool coastline. However, as the vessel continued to deteriorate, the decision was made to dismantle her in situ. By October 2008, the once proud ferry had been reduced to scrap. Her final voyage cut short by the unforgiving power of the sea. MS Zenobia, the unsinkable shipwreck. The MS Zenobia, a 584-foot Swedish roll-on roll-off ferry, embarked on her maiden voyage in May 1980, carrying a cargo of 104 tractor-trailers from Malmö, Sweden, to Tartus, Syria. However, shortly after departing, the crew noticed that the vessel was listing heavily to port. The captain, suspecting that the ballast tanks had been overfilled, ordered them to be emptied as the ship approached Larnaca, Cyprus. Despite this effort, the Zenobia continued to list, and the captain decided to return to port. Mysteriously, just 1,600 feet from the harbor, the Zenobia began to sink. The crew managed to evacuate safely, but the ferry, along with her valuable cargo, disappeared beneath the waves. Conspiracy theories abound regarding the true nature of the Zenobia's cargo. Some speculate that the tractor trailers were carrying illegal weapons destined for the Middle East, while others believe that the sinking was part of an insurance fraud scheme. Today, the wreck of the MS Zenobia is a popular diving site, attracting underwater enthusiasts from around the world. Captain JP3, a vortex of chaos. In January 2019, a powerful polar vortex descended upon the northeastern United States, bringing with it bone-chilling temperatures and treacherous ice flows. Amidst this frigid landscape, the Captain JP3, a cruise vessel moored on the Hudson River in New York, found itself at the mercy of the elements. As the river's icy waters surged and swelled, the Captain JP3's moorings gave way, setting the 111-foot vessel adrift in the swift current. With no crew on board to guide it, the cruise ship became a massive, uncontrolled projectile, careening downstream toward the heart of the city. In a scene straight out of a disaster movie, Captain JP3 first struck the Congress Street Bridge, inflicting damage to both the vessel and the structure.
This is the Captain JP3 on the Hudson River. It's rogue right there, and then right there it slams into an Albany bridge.
Continuing its uncontrolled journey, the wayward ship then collided with the Livingston Avenue Amtrak Bridge, causing further destruction and mayhem. The runaway cruise ship's rampage forced the closure of several bridges and snarled traffic throughout the region as authorities scrambled to bring the situation under control. Ultimately, the Captain JP3 was secured, but not before it had left a trail of damage and disruption in its wake. RMS Titanic, the tragedy of the unsinkable. On April 10, 1912, the RMS Titanic, a massive 882-foot-long luxury passenger liner, set sail from Southampton, England, on her maiden voyage to New York City. The ship, touted as unsinkable by its builders, was the largest and most opulent vessel of its time, a floating palace catering to the wealthy and elite. 4 days into the crossing, on the night of April 14th, the Titanic encountered a large iceberg in the North Atlantic, some 400 miles south of Newfoundland. Despite attempts to avoid a collision, the ship's starboard side scraped along the iceberg, causing a series of punctures in the hull below the waterline. As seawater poured into the ship's forward compartments, it quickly became apparent that the Titanic was doomed. The vessel had been designed to stay afloat with 4 of its 16 watertight compartments breached, but the iceberg had ruptured 5. As the bow sank deeper into the frigid waters, passengers and crew alike scrambled to reach the lifeboats. However, the Titanic carried only enough lifeboats to accommodate about half of the 2,224 people on board, a decision driven by a desire to preserve deck space and aesthetics rather than safety. Women and children were given priority in the lifeboats, while many men were left to fend for themselves on the sinking ship. In the early hours of April 15th, the Titanic's stern rose out of the water as the bow plunged below the surface. The ship broke in two, and the remaining passengers were plunged into the icy sea. By the time the RMS Carpathia arrived on the scene in response to the Titanic's distress calls, only 705 survivors were left to be rescued. The tragedy claimed the lives of 1,517 passengers and crew, making it one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.